This video will show the steps in the repair and the restoration of a Hammond Como synchronous clock. That's C-O-M-O. It's built in the 1930s. I received this clock in a non-working condition. I don't know if that's because it has no power cord or if it has a frozen rotor. But in any event, I'm going to open it up and try to figure it out. In looking at this one closely, we have 3 screws on the back, and I'm hoping that undoing those 3 will cause the whole clock to come out of the case, because the positioning of the set time knob and the start knob are such that I really don't see how I can get them off. And in other Hammond clocks, you need to remove them before you can open the clock up. So we'll start with these 3 screws. I'll take them out and then we'll come back. I've removed the 3 screws. This plate comes off. And just like I was hoping, the case separates. Let's turn this over, see what we have. And already a nut has fallen out from somewhere in here. It'll be interesting to try to figure out where that came from. Well, here's the wires where they were cut. What I'm going to do first is attach an electric cord here, plug it in, and see if it works. So let me get to work on that, and we'll see what's next. Okay, I've connected the wire. We'll plug it in, and we'll see what we get. Well, that doesn't sound too good. I'm going to have to open up and see where this wiring is leading to and what that buzzing was all about. A couple of things of interest with this clock that I can show you. One is I figured out where this nut and washer that fell out came from. The motor wiring, let's see if you can see it. There's one nut and a washer on this post here, but on this side it's missing the nut. Hope you can see that. So that's where that comes from. Once it's opened up, I can reattach that. The other thing is the way that this face comes off of here is, it's hard to see, but this is actually a metal ring that's holding the outer plate to the clock. And if you look really close, you can see one little gap. Let's see if I can find it. It's right over here. And I need to get a little sharp tool in there, and this, it's almost like a spring. I'm going to try to pry that ring out, and then the whole face will come off. So let me give that a shot, and once I start to get it out, I'll come back. Hopefully you can see how I do this. The kind of tools you need would be a couple of actually dental explorers, something with a very fine pointy tip, but strong, won't bend so easily. And I take one of them and put it in the little gap, and as I pry it out a little bit, it creates a space that lets me get the next one in, and I'll try to work my way around, prying this thing out. At some point, I should be able to lift it up and over. And I think I have it. Yep. Now I'm going to be able to tease it the rest of the way out, hopefully. There we go. Look at that. Okay. That went quite well. The next step is going to be to remove the hands. They're usually on quite tightly. It's a friction grip holding the second hand. I like to put a little bit of WD-40 around the stem before I even try to remove it. So I'm going to apply that next. What I like to do is spray a bit of WD-40 into a cap, and then using a small paintbrush, just dab a little bit on the stem. And I'll give that 5 or 10 minutes to let it penetrate. The WD-40 has been soaking for a while, so we'll try to get the second hand off. Just a small screwdriver, try to tease around the edges of it. It's still on quite snug, it seems. There we go. Next, I'm noticing instead of just friction grip on the minute and hour hand, there's a small nut here. So we'll try to loosen that next. But again, I'm going to put a little WD-40 in that and let that soak as well. The WD-40 has been soaking for a few minutes, and now I'll try to loosen the nut. Got that. Now we'll get off the minute hand. Actually, it should just slip off. Okay. And then the hour hand. There you go. There are 3 notches in the rim of the clock face, little tabs that keep the face from spinning once it's seated. However, I like to make a mark at the 12 on the frame just as a point of reference. So that you're not going to put the clock face on off by a few hours just by accident. The next step will be to remove this front plate from the back plate and get access to the gears and to the coil. To do that, I have 3 screws here on the front. I'm going to loosen them, get them out, and then we'll come back. One thing I realized in looking at this more closely is that this plate is separate from this plate over here. So once this is removed, I'm going to lose my reference mark of where I put the 12 because it'll just be rotating anyway. So I'm going to make an additional mark on the second plate down here. Again, just to help me keep the 12 on top. Another thing I'm going to do now, what I highly recommend if you have not taken this type of clock apart yet, take pictures of how these gears look in here. Rotate it all around, because once this plate is removed, if these shift or fall out anyway, and you don't know how they went in to start, you're going to have a really hard time figuring it out. So I'm going to take a few pictures, then we'll get back to removing these screws. I've removed the 3 screws, and you can see where on the plate I've marked on top where the 12 goes, just to keep a reference for everything. I've lifted off the outer plate, and now I'm going to try to gently remove the second one and hopefully not disturb the gears. This is how the gears are arranged. I'm going to take a few photos of this from different angles before removing any of them. Of note is that the plate that came off here, flipping it over, that gear is sort of permanently attached to it. So let me get a good history of what this is made up of, and then we'll proceed. This is the arrangement of the gears. I'm going to try to remove them one at a time and then take a photo of each step. What I'm noticing is that this top gear here seems to be either permanently attached to the one underneath it, or it's skunked onto it and I just can't budge it yet. So I may have to remove these as a unit rather than just individually. So let me work on that. One thing I mentioned at the start of the video that I forgot about is that on the back of the clock, the knobs for the set time and the start knob, I wasn't sure how to remove these, and as a result I'm realizing now that they are attached to these two gears respectively, so you cannot lift them out until I figure out a way to get those knobs off. It does appear, however, that I might be able to tease this gear out first. So there's our first one, which we'll put on the side. And I'll take a picture and then proceed. The next one that I think I can lift out is this one. So let me give that a try. I was able to get this one out. These two separate. And we'll put these aside. What I was able to figure out is that the set knob is attached to the spindle here, pretty much like a friction grip. And by grabbing it here with a vice grip, I was able to rotate and tease this off. And with that off, I can lift out this gear. Now I'll see if I can do the same thing with this one. Because of the housing that surrounds the start knob, I really can't get a grip on it to try to pull it off of the stem that's attached to the gear here. So I'm probably going to leave it the way it is and clean up this gear as best I can. It's not going to make much of a difference because the only time this gear comes into play is when you start the clock. Once it's been started, this gear doesn't come into play at all, so it's not going to affect how the clock is running. So the next step, I believe, is going to be to figure out how to remove the coil, try to find out what's wrong with it, and possibly see if I can replace it with a different one. What I did was completely disassemble the coil from the plate. I'm going to insert some photos here showing what it looks like because I took the thing completely apart. When I put it back together, I sealed up the ends of the exposed wires with some epoxy cement just to insulate it a bit. And then to test it out, I attached a power cord to it with a couple of wire nuts. When I plugged it in now, it no longer buzzes, and when I touch the plate with a screwdriver, I can definitely feel a magnetic field present. So it seems to be working. None of the gears are turning yet, but it's not fully assembled. So I'm going to proceed. The next step will be just to clean up all of the gears and then start to reassemble it. I've cleaned up all the gears, and what I'm going to do now is lubricate them, and I'm going to use a synthetic clock oil, and I place it pretty much on the teeth that are going to engage the other gears, as well as where the ends of the gears fit into the little holes on the top plate and the back plate here, along here. So I'm going to lubricate these and then place all the gears together, and then we'll take a look at it. I've repositioned the gears, and what I'm going to do next is fit the plate over it and then line up the points of the gears in the various holes in the top here. That takes a little bit of doing, so I'll position that in, tighten up the 3 screws, and then we'll be able to hook the power line back onto it and see if it's working. The 3 things I've done here is repositioning the plate, screwing it in, attaching a power cord, and I repositioned the second hand. And now we'll give the start knob a spin and see if it's working. Try that again. And there we go. Now I'll remove the second hand, take off the power cord, and work on getting the clock mechanism back into the case. The one error of omission I made is when I placed these 3 screws back in to tighten it up, I forgot to place the plate on first, which has to sit here before the clock face can go on here. So I'm going to remove these 3 screws and then screw this thing on. I've positioned the plate back on, screwed it in, and because I marked where the 12 goes on the face here as well as on the side, I know how to place the clock face. Next, I'm going to reattach the hands. First, the hour hand. And the minute hand. Now I have to fit the little nut back on. The nut that holds the minute hand on takes a lot of time to properly line up the threads and get it on snug. So I've already done that. I also like to line the hands up to 12. That way it's going to be accurate as the hands go around the dial. And the next is to place the second hand back on. Now we'll work on the dial, the glass and the rim. One other thing in terms of restoring these clocks, to clean them up, I use a little bit of Dawn dish detergent and some warm water with a soft toothbrush to clean any dirt and dust that has accumulated on the dial. Anything more strong, alcohol or even something like Fantastic, you run the risk of removing the paint that's on here. The glass can be cleaned, a combination of using something like Glass Plus, but there's usually a lot of debris on it that with a little razor blade you can scrape off to get this as clean as possible. And as far as the metal rim, I'll use something like Noxon, a metal polish, and that brings up a bit of the shine. So the next step is the glass, the rim, and if you recall, the real tricky part now is going to be fitting that spring clip all the way around the rim. So let me see how that's going to work for us. The spring clip went in much more easily than I expected. Once I tucked a little edge in, I was able to easily just feed it all the way around. I wasn't able to show this because I had to hold the clock on my lap in order to keep the glass and the rim from shifting. Another difference I'm seeing here is, if you recall at the start of the video, it was almost impossible to even see the spring clip. The color of it blended exactly with the rim. Once I polished it though, you can pretty easily see the difference in the color. The next step is going to be attaching the power cord back to this. Although I used wire nuts to attach the power cord as I tested it during the repair, I really can't use these on this clock. Most clock cases are hollow on the inside, and you're able to attach the wire any way you want and sort of tuck it in. But this particular case is just a solid piece of wood, and it fits perfectly over the clock. So there's no room here at all to place wire nuts. So what I'm going to end up trying to do is I'm going to solder the connection of the power cord here, cover it with some electrical tape, and then try to feed the wire up through this little notch is where it's supposed to come out of the clock. I've soldered the power cord to the 2 wires and wrapped them with electrical tape. I'm going to further wrap it together and then tuck the wire into this little crevice here, bringing up through here, the slot. And then I will be looking to fit the ring back over everything prior to inserting it into the clock case. I've positioned the wire into the clock housing, got the ring back around it. It has a little hook that holds it closed, but I fortified it with some electrical tape. The next step is going to be to fit this into the clock case. Before doing that, I restored the wood using a couple of really good products. One of them, Howard's Restore Finish. It comes in different shades depending on the wood. Walnut seems to be the most common one that you can find in Home Depot. And then once you've applied the finish, which hides all the scratches, it really brings the color back out of the wood. Then I wax it with Howard's Feed and Wax, and it ends up looking like this. Gives it a real nice shine, real good polish to it. And then we get the clock to set into here next. Okay, let's get this in here. The next step is going to be to fit the plate onto the back of the clock. But so far, looking pretty good. Okay, now for the plate. I'll start this screw, but then I'll stop it and put the other two in so as not to waste time, and then we'll come back. The reassembly is complete. We're going to plug it in, give the start knob a spin, and see how it goes. I have been noticing that it sometimes takes a couple of spins of that knob to get it going, but let's find out. Okay, got it plugged in. There's one spin. And we got it going. It's the Hammond Como clock, built in the 1930s. And if you've enjoyed this video, check out some of my others. I have other clocks that I've restored in a similar fashion.